Welcome again to tonight's session of the New York Technology Council. Delighted to have you all here. But before we get into the program, I want to say a few words about the Technology Council itself. We're a nonprofit organization. We have a number of annual sponsors. They are essential to our existence. They literally pay the bills. And so if your company is not up here and interested, please let me know. I'd be delighted to add you to this list. I want to give a special thanks to Anchin, who's provided this space tonight and has other points. They're one of our new annual sponsors. And with that, let me turn it over to Michael Shine, who will moderate, put together and will moderate this evening's panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. So thanks everyone for coming out to the second panel in our series on interactive marketing. I see a number of repeat offenders out there, so that's a good thing. You know, as we discussed last time, some of you may have been noticing what's been going on in marketing, whether it's marketing your own products and services or just kind of a general observation. But what worked even 5 years ago in terms of traditional advertising and sales and even getting publicity has been flipped on its head and has totally changed. And you know, the digital world is to blame in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of been a savior because a lot of digital marketing groups and people and innovators have stepped into the gap to really reinvent the way marketing is done. And I'm considering PR a type of marketing, and tonight that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how public relations has had to change, what parts are staying the same, and how it fits into the equation of this new digital world. So, you know, subtitle of the event is what every startup, entrepreneur, and tech company should consider when generating publicity. So it's going to be a mix tonight of sort of discussing the theoretical and what's changing and where we need to go, and trying to let you guys walk away with some practical tips that you can apply to your own, you know, companies and ventures. So I want to, you know, and the way the format's going to work tonight, each of our presenters is going to talk for 10 minutes. We've got a great group, and I do say that for every group, but we truly have a great group tonight who really represent the best in what's being done on the digital front of public relations now. So everybody will present for 10 minutes up here, then we'll do some inter-panel question and answer, and then I want to leave plenty of time for you guys to ask your questions. So let me talk a little bit about who we have with us. We've got Ellie Becker with us. She is the founder and president of E.R. Becker Company, Inc., an inbound marketing consultancy serving business-to-business and business-to-consumer clients worldwide. I've actually known Ellie for a little while now, and she has a very robust history in PR, and she saw a lot of opportunity in the digital world and sort of dove right in and reinvented herself in a big way very successfully. You know, she's lectured at Columbia, she's lectured at Stanford and Southwestern. She chaired the membership committee of Public Relations Society of America's Westchester Fairfield chapter. And before she got into the digital space in traditional PR, she worked on campaigns for Colgate-Palmolive, Buckingham Industries, Baron Philippe de Rothschild, a lot of Fortune 500 companies. So very happy to have her. We've also got with us Richard Larimer. He has owned RLM PR for 18 years. He was the PR director at Columbia Business School. He is the author of 5 best-selling books, one of which I was a big fan of before I had ever met the guy in person. It's called Punk Marketing. He also did Trend Spotting, Full Frontal PR, very successful, very good books. You know, writes the Bad Pitch blog, contributes to Huffington Post. He's on CNN, Fox News, CNBC, NPR, all kinds of stuff. Did a TLC show that was, you know, one of a kind. He's an advertising age. In other words, the guy's all over the place, and we're very lucky to have him with us. And then there is Jeff Rutherford of Wise Public Relations. You know, his background is in journalism, and he very quickly distinguished himself in the PR world. He's been at that for about 16 years. He's had senior positions at a lot of New York PR agencies. He has worked on campaigns for companies like Microsoft, very large companies, SmartUps, like smart ups. That's what we're going to start calling it, everyone. Smart ups. Just credit me.
It's like candy startups.
Yeah, exactly. He's worked at a lot of smart ups, and he holds a BA in journalism from the Henry W. Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications at the University of Georgia. So, without further ado, let's start with Ellie. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here. Glad to see everybody looking pretty perky for the end of the day. Anyway, why don't we just find out a little bit about who's in the room? How many people are software development companies? How many are startups? Would you consider in tech startups? And other industries? So we have kind of a mixed group. Does anybody want to just shout out a couple of different industries that you're in?
I'm in manufacturing.
Right there?
Education.
Anybody else?
Marketing agency.
Marketing agency? Okay.
Consulting.
Consulting? Okay, great. So just so I know that not everybody is totally technology in the room. Okay, so Michael said that I haven't reinvented myself. Well, you have no idea how good I am at reinvention because Michael only knows a couple of the reinventions. But I did start in PR as a really young, not even out of school person. And I worked for a small New York agency that was doing very kind of high-profile events for Fortune 100 companies. And I actually freelanced for them for a number of years from my home in Philadelphia. And then I took a detour and got involved in historic renovation in Philly because there was a lot of that going on in the day. And it was very engaging. So I moved to Connecticut about 10 days before the stock market crashed in 1987. And I was hoping to continue my commercial real estate career there, but of course there was no real estate business anymore after that crash. So I went back to my roots in communication and I started a consultancy, worked with some local companies and some startups, and then I had a small PR agency for about 15 years with a partner in Connecticut. But we worked with a lot of technology companies and a lot of startups who, and we kind of made it our target audience that we only wanted to work with companies that really were doing something that was meaningful and interesting. Because we were at a point in our careers where we felt we owed it to ourselves to work with interesting companies, and we did. And we got small companies that nobody ever heard of, really great national coverage. You know, we regularly had our clients in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Economist and Business Week, a lot of print, and we got great results for these smaller companies that were doing interesting things. And then I guess about 2007, all of a sudden, we took a look at our reports for our clients at the end of the year, and our results were like way down. And all of a sudden, I said to my partner, we've got to take a look, and this is crazy. We're doing all these things that we know how to do and that we've always done and that have always gotten us great results. And there was this little thing that had started called Twitter, and there was social media stuff we were starting to hear about. So, I just decided that I'd better figure out what was going on if I wanted to have a business or if I wanted to be in business. So I started going to some seminars and some workshops, and I went to this thing called the Inbound Marketing Summit in Boston, where I met people like Gary Vaynerchuk and who else? Chris Brogan, who you might have heard. He wrote a bestseller called Trust Agents, and he has some more books since then. But Gary Vaynerchuk took a little family wine business and turned it into a media empire because he quickly glommed onto the power of the internet. And I met these guys, Brian Halligan, I sat and yacked with them about their pretty new company at the time called HubSpot, and what they were trying to do to help people stop doing these fragmented online activities and to put them together in a process, a structured process that they dubbed inbound marketing, that would help them put all of their online activities together into a process that they could measure and that would help them prove their ROI, their bottom line. So, bottom line for me is that I kind of never looked back. And I would say that today I do very little traditional PR and very little traditional pitching. But that doesn't mean that I'm not in PR, because it's always been my contention that the PR approach is really the approach that leads, that's very, that integrates perfectly with the online aesthetic, if you will. We're storytellers in PR, and the internet is all about telling your story. It's not about hype, it's about openness and authenticity. And even though, PR, people were always, people talk about hype and spin. If you're anybody who was ever doing PR well and the right way, was doing it by helping the clients to understand what was really newsworthy and interesting and real about their companies, and then bringing that to the media's attention. That's good enough. If you're doing something good, that's really all you need. So what I realized with the internet is that, and this is what's important for you guys to recognize about your businesses, is that the media isn't the media anymore. And a big focus of PR was always getting media coverage. And we did a lot of pitching, and we did a lot of figuring out story angles and so forth. Now, you almost don't have to do that. And in a way, you almost shouldn't do that, or you actually shouldn't do that. Because now what you can do, if you follow the correct process, you can go directly to your audiences with credibility. We used to need the media to help us, to give us third-party credibility. But now we can have confidence in our own knowledge and our own abilities and our understanding of our industries to show ourselves online in a credible way. You hear about content marketing. Well, that's really what content marketing is all about. Not just telling your story, but demonstrating to the world what you know and that you know what you're talking about, and helping people to get answers to the problems that they're trying to solve. And if you're doing that well, and you have a blog that gets a good following, and you're putting out white papers and ebooks and content that people are finding useful, they're going to find you and they're going to engage with you. And guess what? Who else will find you is the traditional media, or whatever's left of it. Because when I say whatever's left of it, the media is really trying to reinvent. They don't know who they are. And it's one of the reasons that my company's results started going, into the basement in 2007, because the media was kind of riffing out the newsrooms. They were just stripping them down. They were saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? They were sending reporters on beats that they never covered. They were having them write stories for the internet and for print, and bring back video and bring back pictures. And they're still not sure who or what they are. So if you have good content out there, you can get it on a news site. You can do sponsored blog posts. Will you give me will you time me, Michael, and let me know how I'm doing here?
Well,
Anyway.
Haven't done that yet. So,
Okay. I thought you were just so enthralled that you were losing track of time. But anyway, so I do this thing now called inbound marketing, and anybody who has been in the software industry for any number of years might think that it means something other than what it means today. It used to be the way that technology companies and software companies divided their product development cycles, but this has nothing to do with that. It's a different meaning of inbound marketing. And what it is the opposite of pushing out media and interrupting your way into people's lives. So, advertisements, people can DVR, TiVo, or, just go to Netflix and watch what they want. You don't have to see advertisements. There's a thing called voicemail. You can't necessarily get somebody on the phone, you go into their voicemail. So, cold direct, telephone calling doesn't really work very well as a way to advertise your business. All of these, whatever you can think of, snail mail, forget it, it's just patently considered junk. And all of these things, trade shows, all of the, what are called the outbound marketing activities, and even a lot of traditional PR, sending press releases, it just doesn't work because people can avoid it too easily. There's a former Newsweek reporter, Dan Lyons, very well-known guy, he's a very well-known journalist who now works for HubSpot, that software company that does the inbound marketing software. And Dan Lyons just recently wrote a blog post called, is it finally time to bid adieu to the press release? Well, there's still a lot of argument, but I would say to you, or I would ask you, how did Twitter announce its IPO? Did they put a press release out? No, they have never put out a press release. They tweeted it, like they do everything else. So a lot of companies are now announcing their company news on their own blogs and publicizing it, publicizing their news on. So, what I can say to you is that technology companies are very, you're out there looking for solutions and you're using technology to help solve people's and companies' problems. But a lot of technology companies that I've worked with don't look for solutions to their own problems. They're like the shoemaker's children, I guess, in a certain way. And what I'm saying to you is that you really need to look at your marketing. You need to look at it in terms of reinventing. If you're used to going to trade shows, okay, well that might work if you integrate, what you're doing on a one-to-one basis, face-to-face, with what you do online.
Although we're getting pretty close. I think I didn't watch it exactly.
Okay,
but,
good. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'll say some other things for Q&A. But the marketing world is evolving every single day, and you need to figure out a way to be strategic. Put your social SEO, which is now going by the wayside too, and blogging, content marketing together in a strategic way that you can take to the bottom line. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much, Ellie. And we definitely have a lot of room in the questions and answers to keep going. And before I introduce Jeff, there was one very important person that I forgot to introduce tonight. And it's this charming gentleman standing before you right here. I was so excited to introduce the panel. My name is Michael Shine. I am the founder and principal of Michael Shine Communications. We're the originators of a process called content casting, which arms businesses to create their own online content in a way that turns them into authorities so they can generate a steady stream of new business. We've created content or facilitated content creation for eBay and LinkedIn, Avectra, Tesla Inc., Interneer, Arise Virtual Solutions, Citrix, a number of other companies. I got my start a little bit about me, I got my start at the company that produces pop-up video, and I am the author of a book for Macmillan called Teenage Roadhogs. Just had to get that out there. So let's, a little bit of self-promotion never hurt anyone. So Jeff.
How do I follow up Teenage Roadhogs?
I don't know, I'm sure you can think of a way.
I'll try. So I'll talk about PR and digital marketing, but first I wanted to recommend and give you a tip that if you are working on a startup, if you're interested in startups, and you've never listened to the podcast Mixergy, I highly recommend that you take a listen to it. It's one of the best podcasts if you're interested in business or startups. I have no affiliation with Mixergy. I have had clients on there, but the host really, he usually does an hour to an hour, 15-minute interviews. He really digs in and like asks very tough questions. How much money are you making? How did you get your first customer? How did you get your 100th customer? What did you do when you created a product and nobody wanted it? So just a suggestion. I think it's a really good podcast, and you can learn a lot from other entrepreneurs who are out there kind of in their day-to-day struggles. And I'll probably, what's that? Mixergy, Mixergy. And you can get like the last 10 episodes, and then he has a Mixergy Premium where you can get all of the previous episodes. But I highly recommend it if you're in this space and you haven't listened to it before. And I'll probably repeat some of what Ellie said, but I'll give you different takes on it. One thing about press releases, she mentioned press releases, and I tell clients and potential clients, I've never spoken to a reporter in 16 years of doing PR and had a reporter tell me, I can't wait to wake up in the morning and run to my email and read press releases, because that's the reality. And unfortunately, a lot of times people get into PR and they start thinking about PR for their businesses, and they will look at some PR textbooks. Richard and I were talking about some of the textbooks that are out there, and reporters are not writing stories. I mean, the stories from the Wall Street Journal, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times today, were not generated from press releases. They were generated from one-on-one communications between reporters and the businesses that were featured in those articles. But so what does everyone in this room, including the people on this panel, want? They want to be in those stories. They want press for their companies. And with the changing role of PR and digital marketing, how do you do that? How do you get there? Especially if you're running a startup and you don't have the money to go out and hire a marketing firm or hire a PR firm. And there are ways that you can do that, and I'll kind of go through some of those. And one thing is, I would say don't wait for the press. There's lots of phrases that you hear about the internet and digital media and the democratization of media. And basically what that means is anybody can be a publisher. Literally, anybody can be a publisher. And that's the power of the internet, and that's the power of content marketing. And you hear the phrase content marketing or inbound marketing, and what does that mean exactly? If you do any Google searches, you'll see it's become a buzzword, and you'll read tons and tons of articles about content marketing or inbound marketing. Basically, we all live in an age of digital searches. If we want a recipe, we search. If we want to learn how to mix a cocktail that we've never mixed before, we do a digital search. Mobile devices has only accelerated that. As you all know, Apple sold 9 million new iPhones in the first weekend. Android sells millions of devices every day and activates them. So people turn automatically to, in most cases, Google, but other search as well. And obviously people, the examples that I just mentioned are related to leisure activities, but people are searching for answers to their business problems. I'm struggling with a business problem. People are going to turn automatically to Google and search for someone who has had that same problem and figured out a solution to it. So content marketing is basically providing the content so that when someone goes searching for the product and service that you offer, that they end up ideally on your site. And how do you do that? If you're starting out, what do you write about? I would say you don't want to be kind of the annoying person that you meet at a cocktail party or at a networking event that only talks about themselves. And so you're not going to get a lot of effectiveness in terms of content marketing by writing specifically about your company and your product and your services. So what do you write about? Well, one thing is that you can start looking at your industry and talking about your industry. What's going on in your industry? What are the business problems that you solve? But you're not talking about it in the frame of here's this problem and we solve it. It's more of talking about the problem and exploring it from multiple angles. And the fact is, if you're providing that content for people and it's solving a search for when they go in search of it, they're going to end up in your site and they're going to end up in your marketing funnel. And they're going to, if you do it ideally, they're going to end up as a paying customer. And ultimately, they're going to see you as a resource within the industry. And so what do you write about besides, you know, the industry? It's very easy to figure out. What are the questions that most customers come to you with? What questions do your salespeople hear? What questions do your customers ask? That's what you should be writing about on your website, answering those questions, and that's going to be the questions that people are searching for that end up coming to your site and learning more about your business. So one of the things that I also talk to startups about is using data from within their company to do what I refer to as kind of data-driven PR. And what do I mean by that? And this is something I talk to clients about all the time, literally startups. Depending on what you're in, but most software startups, you should start thinking about data from day one. Because data you can use from your own users and extrapolate it to talk about industry-wide problems. I'll just give you some examples of companies that have used data in interesting ways. Who is familiar with the company Uber? The app where people can, well, Uber said, what can we look at in our data? And obviously when I'm talking about data, I'm not talking about personalized data. They're not talking about one specific person, but they aggregated their data and they said, what can we look at in terms of our users? And they came up with this idea, which some people may find a little bit risque, but they came up with this idea of, you know what, we can look at our data and we can determine what we refer to as a ride of glory. And what that meant is, on a Friday or Saturday night, if two people take an Uber to one location, and then in the next 7 to 8 hours, one person leaves that location and goes somewhere else, we're going to define that as a ride of glory, meaning someone hooked up. They came out with this data, presented it on their blog, and got nationwide news coverage. Because what they said was people in Boston are hooking up more than any other metro area in the US. And they had the stats across the cities. And that was an interesting use of data. Another company that did this was in the online dating arena, OkCupid. They were in a very competitive arena. They were running the business in the middle of a recession in 2008. They needed to get new customers in, new people to create profiles. So they started crunching the data in terms of their profiles and did tons and tons of data announcements where they would look at interesting things about, you know, the way that people are finding partners, dating partners. If you look at the OkCupid blog and look back through the archives, you can see it. And again, they were not working with an outside PR firm. They were doing all of this internally, looking at this data, reporting about it, and reporters started coming to them, and they got nationwide news coverage through that. In terms of content marketing, where you know you're not doing traditional PR, where you're focusing on the content on your site, there are a couple of examples of companies that have been very successful doing this. One is a company called Buffer. Buffer is a app that you can use to schedule your tweets. They tried to get traditional PR themselves. They didn't work with an outside PR firm, and what they discovered was nobody was really interested in their app. None of the tech reporters were interested in their app. So they said, well, we've got to just create our own content and try to find people that way and attract customers. So what they started doing, they started out, and it's kind of an evolution if you look back and kind of strategically examine their site and what they did. They first started out where they started doing Twitter tips, you know, how you can be more effective in Twitter. And then it evolved and they started talking about general social media tips, what people could do to be successful. And then it evolved even further, and now if you go to the Buffer blog, they talk about everything from, sorry, so my time is up, but I'll quickly wrap up. They talk about everything from life hacks to productivity. And in terms of success, they now have 1 million users, 16,200 paying customers, generating $2 million plus in revenue per year. They've never worked with a traditional PR firm, and they've solely relied on content from their blog and also doing guest posts on other blogs, getting that traffic to their site, getting them into the funnel, and converting those people to paying customers. So we'll talk about this a lot more. I welcome any questions, and that's it. Richard?
Good.
We've run out of things to talk about. I've been in the business since 1986, and I've seen this industry of PR change. But the one thing that has remained the same, and people always forget about this, is that every single person and every single company does PR for that company. And people forget that. They forget that every time somebody opens their mouth, every time somebody brings something up at a cocktail party, every time somebody wants to put something out on a tweet, doesn't matter who they are and what position they are. That is the pure definition of what public relations is. We used to talk about media relations, the idea of people bringing stories to the press, and it was always about what the relationships were with the media. And in the last 7 or 8 years, ever since the advent of the blog as the popular source of media, what's happened is it's really become about what people put out there as far as who they are and what they have to say. And these guys just went into this whole discussion about, I couldn't agree with them more, about content. I come from the school of thought. My firm's been around for over 20 years, and we've always done the same thing. We've always, regardless of whether it's interactive or traditional or wherever you're going to go with it, we've always wanted our clients to be attached to burgeoning trends, to trends that haven't really been brought to light. And the way to do that, quite honestly, is to be an informed individual. If you want to get your company out there, you must attach it, whether you're doing it through a LinkedIn group or whether you're doing it through a New York Times article. It's still the same thing. It's always about making sure that people understand what trend are you most associated with. If you look in the media today, if you look at anything that anybody's talking about, whether it's twerking or the shutdown of the government, it always started with a trend that people didn't know about. And the objective in any company is to get people talking about you, and the way to do it is through good trends. I also want to point out a couple of other things. One is that people are not interested in products as much as they're interested in people. And one of the things that I think we all forget about, is that we don't offer ourselves as sources enough. And you're here doing interactive PR, and I think, and I hope all of you are jumping into this. The fact is, and they talked about it a lot, is if you're a source, if you can offer yourself up as a source, and people say, well, I can't, I'm not really trained to do that. But the fact is that everybody is talking to everybody now. We all have these little screens. As long as what you say doesn't go past here, then everything is fine. You need to attach, again, like I said earlier, you need to attach yourself to topics that you feel are most important to you. I spend probably, I would say, 10 hours of every day talking to my clients and talking to other people about the idea of what it is that they want to say. What are they forcing themselves? What are they talking to people about every single day? What is the topic that they're most passionate about? What are they hopefully blogging about? What are they commenting on other people's blogs? What is that topic that means the most? And the objective is to distill that down to the thing that you care about the most, the one thing you care about the most, and bring it to as many people as you can through as many resources. The beauty of this is, starting in 1996, when Word magazine was released, they were a client of ours. They were the first blog, and people were surprised because it was a way for so-called journalists, and at the time just writers in general, to put out their thoughts as a kind of a rolling magazine that just went up and down, and people would be able to insert their comments into it, and it became a kind of a shocking thing because during the political election of 1996, all of a sudden people were talking about Can we do something that, I remember Bob Dole made a big deal out of the fact that he had bobdole.com and that people could go and put in their comments. And at the time, it was a pretty big deal. And every few years, there's something new, and there's a new gimmick or a new idea or some like last year everybody was talking about Tumblr and how important it is to have a Tumblr. And these things are all terrific, but if you're not attaching yourselves to something important or at least interesting, and it has to be real passion, you can't fake it, then really you're wasting your own time. Because it's not, as they said, it's not about the press release. It hasn't been about the press release in probably 15 years. What it is about is about the thing that you are telling people that you care about the most. And people say to me, oh, well, I'm not big enough. Well, the beauty of being in a city like New York or wherever you happen to be, you're in East Norwalk, is that everybody has a local story. And we have clients from all over the world who start out as a local story. And as you know from our friends at Google, there's no such thing as local news anymore. So once you put yourself out there as a source locally, you are then being produced as a source nationally, because you now have something that is in the archive that is being presented. And it's funny, when Michael first brought this up and said, oh, we want to talk about interactive PR in an interactive age, all I could think about was, in the end, nothing has really changed. I mean, we're still out there. We're still, today, I don't know if you guys read the New York Times still, but in the New York Times, we had a client called Facetune. They're an app that helps you make your face look better. And the Times did a big piece on it today, and people say to me all the time, oh, traditional is dead. But the fact is that if you go to the Washington Post and you read past the 4 sections, you see 50 bloggers writing about 50 topics, and people spend their days reading through these things, not locally, but nationally, because they want to find what interests them. And if you have something passionate that you're passionate about, that is involved in, I heard about some of your businesses, and it's a topic that you know things about, that you can get into the nitty-gritty, you need to share that information with as many people as possible. It's hard work. It's a full-time job for everybody. But I think Jeff mentioned this, it's important to involve the internal, whoever else is in your business in this process as well. Internal public relations is probably the thing that people forget about the most. If you have a mission, if the thing that you guys are doing is really important to you, and you know exactly what it is that you're doing, every single person that works for you, works with you, wants to work for you, your friends and family and spouses and mistresses, they all have to know about what you do too. They have to be able to speak that one line, and everybody has to be talking the same way. And once that happens, you find yourself, again, it's the network society that we live in. Everybody wants to know something new that they learned from somebody else that they want to tell to 5,000 other people. And again, just to sum this up, you have to think about yourself as the ultimate source, and you have to think about yourself as somebody who attaches themselves to a trend that hasn't really taken off yet. And if you do these things, again, it's very tactical. If you do these things, you find out that in the end, it doesn't matter how small or where you are with your company, there's always going to be somebody who's going to want to take it to the next level. And that is my talk tonight.
Well, thank you very much.
16 seconds.
Well, jumping off actually from where Richard left off. So I love the idea of finding a trend right before it breaks, right? And everyone spoke to that in one way or another. I think Richard sees it more holistically, and he's still in the offline and online worlds where we've heard more about the digital, from Ellie and Jeff. But how do you find that trend? And more importantly, before it's going to break, not content marketing, right? I mean, everyone's doing content marketing.
Yeah.
But how do you find it before it's going to break? And more importantly, how do you attach that to your business, especially if your business isn't Miley Cyrus, right? Or twerking, right?
Well, that's sort of the point of I sort of blurted it out earlier that it's really important for people to be informed. You probably have heard that there's a new statistic that 75% of the information that you want to get comes to you without you having to try. somebody sends it to you, or you see it on Twitter, or you see it on Facebook. You don't have to try. It's that other bit of information. It's those 6 or 7 topics that you don't care about, that you need to be more informed in. And what happens is, the more that you learn about, let's say you're into entertainment but not politics, the more you learn about politics on your own, and the more you learn about those topics by using Google, or even, strangely enough, buying magazines that really are magazines still being published, reading through things that don't necessarily. What happens is, you start to see, if you read through all these topics and you don't look at the stuff that you're most fascinated, you start to see certain trends that are about to connect. Something in the news, somebody is doing something with the government, somebody is, you discover this by being an informed person, and it's a process. It's a process where you need to bring those ideas to your friends and family and say, what do you think about such and such? And the way to connect yourself to it is through the content, through making sure that you put out that blog, that you contact people that are doing stories on that you constantly, you and your people are constantly talking about that trend that hasn't quite broken yet, and you want to make your company, meaning yourself, a source for that trend. You want to be able to talk about it because you are learning and giving out what you've learned more than anybody else.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think part of it is, and I oftentimes see this with startups, where I think there has to be a certain inward focus as you focus on your product or your service. But at some point, you also have to look beyond and see where, and be realistic, where you fit into those burgeoning trends and what's going on in whatever sector, so that you can talk, as Richard said.
And you can make up trends too, if you
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean,
but they have to be fun.
I think it's, and I think, like Richard said, I think you have to be really informed and kind of be open. I mean, I think, a few years ago, or I wouldn't say a few years ago, but easily like a year ago, and even now, you're hearing a lot about kind of the quantified self, all of these apps and devices that will track your movement and will upload it automatically, so that you can, so you can follow your fitness. Well, there's a company that has an app that kind of combines game elements with fitness. It's called Zombies Run.
Oh, God.
And I think it's just like an amazing app, and I think that if you look at this, you're going to see a lot more apps along this line, where there's a fitness element, so you're running, but there's also a narrative element. You're listening to the app in your headphones and you're running from zombies, and there's a whole fictional element, so it's tracking your running. So I think that, looking at things like that and being aware.
Right.
I think just
being aware is really the key in
Yeah.
all this.
Yeah, well, I have a little bit different, well, it is about awareness, but, I've had an interesting experience my entire life as a baby boomer, which I admit to. That something I learned is that if I was interested in something, or if I found myself being pulled in a certain direction, or, being interested in something, that there was already a trend. Because there are these influences that are around us that are even subconscious. And so, a lot of times I would just say, and you have to give up thinking how unique and special you are to believe in this. But I said, whoa, things would become trends right after I started doing them. So I started to tune into the fact that if I'm there, so are a lot of other people. And, it's just a question of getting confident about that, so that you start acting on it before everybody else realizes they're in a trend. So by accepting that, you can just kind of get ahead of it.
Or take that trend and go further with it, right?
Right.
If something, everybody's talking about selfies, right? This idea of taking your, so we decided to, to do this big push with my client Facetune, with the improved selfie, and what that means, and how people are, kind of annoyed that their self-portraits are kind of not very good. And there's this whole thing on Instagram where they don't let you touch up certain things and we wanted to show people that you couldn't do this without help. And it became a kind of a fight. Instagram says selfies have to be this way, we say it has to be this way. And suddenly, we got all these people talking about it, and now it's the #2 app in the country. So, it is about, a trend is not necessarily something trendy, because that could be a fad. It's something that is already kind of big, and you want to take it to the next level. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's right.
Well, so, I mean, theoretically, I don't know that everyone in this room knows how to create a blog or an online media property that works, but I think everyone knows that if they wanted to share their beliefs about something in their trends, they could get the infrastructure up there and they could do it. So a two-part question is there still a place for, I know Richard's thought on this, but I want to hear it across, is there still a place for offline media, and why? I mean, Ellie saw that her results were falling after years of success, so, you know, and Richard says there's still a place. So where does that fit in? And the second thing is, yeah, we have to be informed, we have to be speaking, but I can't tell you how many startups I've talked to who are very passionate, people at startups who say, I've got the best idea in the world, we're going to change the world, and I can't get anyone to pay attention to it. I can't right?
Passionate about your idea. I'm talking about passionate about a particular topic that the world cares about that it has to do with your business. You can be
Right.
passionate. You have to be passionate about that. In other words, you have to find the thing, the mission of what you're doing, and you have to say, we're not changing the world because that's a cliche, but this is what I believe in, and it
Sure.
isn't what we're doing. Sorry.
But no, but what I mean is, and that's a great point.
I just wanted to point out, I mean, I think he has a very good point. I mean, I don't know all the specifics about his client, but, I think what he is explaining is exactly what we're talking about, where he has this client that has this app so that you can improve your photo. And so what he did was look at this trend of what are people doing with photos. Well, they're taking self photos, and how can you tie that company to a trend? And I think that's the case. I mean, and again, I think the key is not to be trendy, but also to figure out, what are people writing about in the media and connecting your company to that.
But to clarify,
Okay, yeah.
do you mind holding the question to the end?
I have a question,
Okay.
So you have a trend.
Right.
You're passionate about something.
Right.
You have the infrastructure to creating a blog. I mean, that's really
Yeah, it's
easy.
easy.
You can do that. So many platforms out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
How do you start to write something?
Oh.
And how does that process start?
Well,
you're passionate. Maybe you don't know grammar as well as you maybe
No,
should.
but the thing is
you
that
wanna
is that
write
blog a really good blog post
Yeah.
is an opinion, is something that comes from you, and you have to think about, like, if you meet with a friend, what is the thing that you're talking to that friend about besides pop culture? What is the thing, or it could be about pop culture, but in other words, what is that thing? And you have to listen to those words because it has to be in your voice. So you write what you're talking about. And that's what a blog is an opinion coming from you that isn't self-promotional. It can't be because people will just ignore it. It has to be an opinion that people will go, oh, that's an opinion I hadn't thought of. And that's how people start to take it and share it and throw it. But writing blogs is not the same as writing like an article. It's really you. It's just how you would talk.
I agree
And
with
you don't
that.
have to reference anything.
No.
It's just like
No.
you just say
It's
what's
a
on your
conversation.
mind.
250 words of you.
And
That's it.
I would definitely agree with that. I think
Guys, I'm
obviously-
sorry to interrupt for a second, but I do want to finish this question, but then
I'm
we're
sorry.
going to wait until the end to handle
good
the rest of
question.
the question and answer, okay? Just so we can
Well,
keep everything
I just wanted
But
to
yeah.
comment on that. I mean, obviously, you want to be professional, but I would not get hung up on grammar. I know that's, kind of, I think that's counter to what some people would think. That I guarantee you, if it's passionate, reporters will respond to that.
Everybody will respond.
And everyone will respond.
If,
to it.
that's the amazing thing about search now is that it's not the words that you use, it's the way that you use them.
I'd actually like to chime into this, and I'm coming at this from a slight different angle, but I would completely agree that online content in general, and especially blogging, does not have to be polished. In fact, it's cool if it's a little bit raw, but what it can never be is boring. And part of that is letting it flow, but at the same time, some people who just let it flow take 7 paragraphs to get to the main point. So what I would add to that, what I think can be helpful, is there are structures out there. There are ways to create a blog post that are more effective at getting the same point across. I mean, there's a reason people use list posts, and I'm not saying that's the best form, but people write 15 sex tips guaranteed to please your man. There's a reason Cosmopolitan runs that every week. And I'm not saying that's the one, but I'm saying that there are structures that you can use to allow you to be a little more compelling with what might otherwise ramble on and be
Well,
slightly more boring.
if
And,
it's a single point that
Yeah.
you're making and you actually stop and don't continue it after you make that point, then you've written your blog.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
good
I would
point.
just add to that,
Yeah.
and I would think that he would agree. I think that probably spend as much time on your headline as you do
Yeah.
on the blog.
100%, most important part, hands down.
And have some fun with it.
Because
Yeah.
look
Always.
at I mean, BuzzFeed is one example. I think a better example is Business Insider.
Yeah.
Right.
If you look at like
It's all headlines.
if you look at Business Insider like over 2, 3, 4 days, and just really look at how they structure their headlines. I mean, they are masters at getting you to click. And you know, the headline is everything in social media. I mean, obviously with Twitter, with the 140 character limitation, but it applies across the board, Google Plus, Facebook. The first thing that people are going to see is that headline. And I would say if you write something that you're really passionate about, you share it via social media, if people aren't responding, go back in and rewrite the headline again.
And make it
There's-
funny, use a pun,
Yeah.
think about how you would joke with your friends about it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
And guys, since we do only have a half hour, and I'm sensing from the audience that everyone does have a lot of questions, I'm willing to just start opening it up to Q&A now. Is that what everyone wants to do? Okay, so that gentleman there, and then this gentleman right here.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question. Obviously, your discussions have been focusing more on written formats, blogs.
Right.
Okay. Certainly over the last year, we've seen probably more emphasis shifting over towards video content.
That's true.
interactive. Can
It
you
is
comment with respect to
Yeah.
how do you see video emerging?
Yeah,
as a
I was
trend,
actually-
and to
I
what
was-
extent do you see
Yeah,
it
I
possibly
was waiting to get
Yeah.
to that as well.
or complementing
Yep.
what you're discussing with respect to blogs?
I was actually going to mention that, and I was actually going to respond to your question with that, I would really encourage you that if you are passionate about something, but you don't feel comfortable writing, explore other avenues. One is video, the other is audio. I think that there's a huge, and I was actually talking to Michael before the panel, I think there's a huge unexplored niche and unexploited niche right now in terms of audio content for B2B companies. There's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of comedy podcasts. There's a lot of business and entrepreneurial podcasts. But I think that, and I'll just give you an example. One area of my business is app marketing for app developers so that they can drive more downloads for their mobile apps. To help kind of drive that business, I started an audio podcast called the Appetite PR podcast, where I go out and interview app developers. What did you do to drive downloads? Just through that podcast. And I barely do any PR for it because it's kind of the cobbler's, what's the phrase?
Shoemaker's
Yeah,
job.
exactly, shoemaker's children. But I create the podcast, I do the interviews, I upload it so it ends up in iTunes, it ends up in Google search results. I average 2 or 3 inbound emails a week from app developers saying, I heard your podcast, what can you do to help me in terms of app marketing? And I think that there's plenty of niches out there that if you go and look on iTunes, there's no podcast out there and it's just waiting there ripe for the taking. So that's audio, same thing with video.
And I would say that video is, well, I know it's really the future, and I think you're going to hear a lot more about video. It's so easy to get video. It doesn't have to be polished or fancy. You can do it on a pretty regular basis. I mean, it has to look halfway decent, but one reason that it's really exceptionally important is because think about who owns YouTube. Google. So if and I do want to say something else that is getting to be much more important in terms of driving search results. Video is one of them. The other thing is that Google is giving far more weight to social. So whatever content you create, if you have to make sure to publicize it on social media, and especially Google Plus, because it's Google's social network. So especially for
Start a hangout on
B2B.
Google Plus and it'll do wonders for your
Yeah.
search.
So you have to think of these
Yes, thank
things
you, Mike.
not just in isolation. Let's do video, let's do social, let's do a blog. You have to start thinking about how they all work together towards an end result.
And
So-
I agree with that.
Okay.
Here's a related tip around that as well, sorry.
Okay.
If you're doing an audio or video, spend the money, there are services out there that are really cheap. Get a text transcript, put the text transcript on your site. Just naturally in an audio conversation, you're going to use a lot of rich keywords that if you put the text on there, Google sucks it up. Right now, Google does not have any way. They'll see that there's an audio file on your site.
Right.
They have no way of knowing what that audio file is about.
Right.
That's a great tip, yeah.
So if you take that text transcript, drop it in there, Google will index it, and just naturally, without any kind of manipulation, just naturally a conversation about your industry, you're going to be using keywords that are valuable for your search engine optimization of Google.
I'm sorry.
People are always saying, oh, there are a million blogs, I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. The truth is, and this is a statistic that came out only a few months ago, there are hundreds of millions of blogs, but only 10 million of them are updated regularly. So think about that. That's not a very big number. And updating regularly is the key to success in this. It doesn't matter if it's video, audio, it doesn't matter if you're screaming at the top of your lungs. If you do it, you don't have to update it every day, you don't even have to update it every week. People just start blogs and stop them, and it's ridiculous. And you have to continue. You have to, even if you just put out a paragraph saying, I didn't feel like doing it this week, whatever. You have to put something, into it. It is part of your job. It really is, and it has to be done. Somebody has to do it.
One other thing to add before we get to your question, I'm sorry, but this is important. It's very important, especially on the digital piece, and just more broadly about being your company's advocate, to be very honest about your strengths and weaknesses. And because limitations will sometimes spark creativity and put you in a place you didn't know. So to give you an example, as I mentioned, we set up systems to arm companies to create their own content. We set up the processes, we train them on how to do it. And we found at this one company, Tesla Inc., there was a guy, Pierre, who was 25 years old, brilliant economist. He was French, and he spoke fine, but there was no way he was writing. But we talked to him and we evaluated him, and we found out he was hilarious. He was very funny. So we could have had him try to write a blog. We could have tried to fit, a square peg into a round hole. But what we did instead, we created a video series around him. His content was always video. And through that limitation, and he was very open to this and drove some of it, he kind of got this French wacky weatherman persona because the product is very high tech. They use weather variables to predict energy load for utilities. He'd be like, today we're talking about soil radiation, and it was a lot of fun. And it's something that never went, but he embraced it. I mean, it was very funny, and he played up his accent, he really got into it, and people loved it, and it was very, very popular. But if we hadn't found what that strength was, and if we had tried to make him write, you got a blog, it would have flopped.
The key word in that paragraph was found. And I find that when people in companies get together and they come up with the crazy idea, that's the wackiest thing, we could never do that, that's the idea you have to do.
Right.
That's when people say, oh, we should do a blog post or just blog about a topic that's ancillary to us, but it's kind of nutty and it'll probably offend somebody, that's the one to do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's not gonna be interesting. It's not gonna be interesting to you. And if it's not interesting to you, then it's not gonna be interesting to anyone, particularly Google's.
Yeah,
so let's move on to
that's a very good point. I think sometimes people get tripped up. Obviously you don't want to be offensive to your audience, but I would strongly what you don't agree.
I don't know. I think it.
And guys, last
when
response,
people-
because we really got to get to
yeah,
some of the
sure.
other questions.
When people start worrying about who they're offending, then they're not really writing and they're not really doing anything. I don't think people get offended by anything anymore.
Okay.
It's too. We live in an apology culture. Just do what you think is right.
And then apologize.
Sure.
All right, wait. Let's
Okay,
get this
yeah.
one here, and then
So,
next.
a couple of questions. One is, so you say, okay, ignore, all the writers, the media, just write your own blog. But that's going to be a very slow, growth path, right?
I didn't say
that. Somebody said,
Yeah.
in
You
the
can't
long
ignore
run.
anybody.
So-
No, I-
so I'm
Yeah,
saying-
you
No,
can't.
we were just saying traditional is lessened because so many of these people are not necessarily writing traditionally. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So you still have to reach out to people, but you can
Yes.
reach out through links.
Yeah.
You can say, this is what I did, and, and you not ignore it.
Yeah, I was just going to say my time ran out, so I didn't get to kind of the second part. So what do you do after you create all this content? You obviously want to share it with reporters. So what do? You don't just like ping them with links to your own blog. Sit down, figure out the 10 or 15 reporters that are like the key people in your space that are writing specifically about what your company is. Friend them on social media. Believe me, reporters have egos. If you're following them on Twitter and you reshare their stuff, they notice that.
And reference what they talk about when you
Right.
talk to
If
them.
you comment on their blog, especially, set up a Google alert so that you see as soon as they post an article, because if there's someone who gets tons of comments and you're the 200th comment, they're not going to notice. If you're in the first 10 comments, they will notice because they look at that. Believe me, they read the feedback. So you do want to have that 10 to 15 reporters that are that you want to go after. Do it in social media, reshare their stuff. Start conversations, not about your company, but if they write an article and you disagree with it, tell them you disagree with it.
And tell them why.
And tell them why. They want to hear that.
The other thing is there are influencers now that aren't traditional reporters. And I would say traditional reporters are very important still. But there are online influencers that can almost serve as rocket fuel. There's a conversation going on around every industry, around every topic. There are bloggers in the sheet metal industry who are influential in their field and who have thousands of commenters. You need to dig deep and find out who those influencers are. And this is where online is better than traditional, one of the reasons. I mean, there's other, traditional, you get the prestige, you get a wide readership. Online, though, people want to share your stuff because they want you to interview them. They want you to guest post on them for human reasons, but also for technical reasons, because Google runs on linking. If a high authority site links back to them, how do you think they became high authority? That's the algorithm. It's all about interlinking. So there's this ecosystem that goes on online that's beautiful, but you got to find the right influencers on there. And I think it's the combination with the press. So Ellie, did you want to?
No, I'm
comment?
just
Yeah.
nodding because I'm agreeing with you on that. But one thing I will say though is, don't try to game the system because
Right.
Please don't.
I agree.
because that totally doesn't work. Michael brought up the importance of links. Well, Google in its last algorithm changes, it's changing them all the time, but
The major one.
they're a major one. They're shutting down what is known as guest blogging. If you get an email where somebody says, "Oh, we're going to get you lots of links, and you're going to, we're going to do guest blogging." We have relationships with 500 bloggers, and we'll do a guest post. They're not talking about doing quality, organically developed quality content. They're talking about putting some crap up
Right.
on some
There's a
crappy
difference.
website and using some what's called anchor text links, which is getting a keyword and then linking from that keyword back to your website. Forget it. That is totally out the door. And
Although,
another,
can I clarify I'm actually
No,
asking.
yeah.
With this new update, I'm assuming that if I were to form a relationship with another blogger, guest post a legitimate post, and then link anchor text in, link digital marketing company, am I going to be penalized for that? I don't believe so.
No, not if it's something that actually is germane
If
to
it's-
what you're doing. In
Yeah.
other words,
Is that true? I mean-
Right,
the spiders can tell when you're just sort of putting yourself in something
Yeah,
as
but-
an insertion.
but I would
Yeah.
just say, get the link back to your website, but I would still stay away from anchor text links when it comes to,
So where should the links
So
be?
just,
Because in the past, that was their whole.
because then you have a little thing that says Michael Shine is blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
Right.
blah, 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 and put a link to your website.
But can you link to digital marketing company?
Sure.
I know this is picky, or should you
If
link
it's,
from
if
the
it's
name
in
of
your,
it?
if it's in your,
Right.
if it's in your tagline, sure, why not?
Well, no, so I know this is technical, but I'm trying to determine, because in
Yeah.
the past, that was the best thing you could do.
I know, but that's,
But-
but
right.
it was, but people tried to game the system, which is
Right.
why they're kind of shutting that down.
Okay.
Now, another thing, this is a very important thing that has got SEO companies, one paid thing that you may want to consider doing is now doing a little bit of a Google
Right.
pay-per-click AdSense. The reason why is that Google is no longer sharing search results. In other words, you used to be able to use their free tool called the Google Keyword Tool, which would show you if a certain search term was getting any search volume, how many people were searching on that search term every month, which was important to do because
Actually, every day.
or every day.
Yeah, they were doing it every day.
Yeah, but they
They stopped.
yeah, but anyway, I mean, they would tell you what the monthly search volume is or the
Sure.
annual search volume. But now, they are no longer sharing that information, unless you're an AdSense customer, you're doing a
Paying.
pay-per-click, and you're paying. So everybody
They do
build,
the monthly searches, I actually just looked into today.
okay, but it's
Under the
changing.
keywords, though,
It's
you
it's
you're
on
paying
your
for
site,
keyword. You
it's
must
on
pay
your
for
site
keyword.
that's
You have to
not.
be paid.
No, what I'm saying is, what she's referring to is the searches on your site. Well, if you're using Google Analytics, they now
Right.
show like,
No, yeah, that's one thing, but
Yeah.
also on the Google.
The keyword tool is
the
still-
keyword-
yeah.
They changed the name, but
Yeah,
they
it's
still
the-
give
it's
you the
Keyword
monthly.
Planner,
I think they
yeah.
don't give you as much information as
Right.
they give you.
Yeah, but
They don't give you the
Give you one
specific
figure.
keyword
But what
breakdown,
you-
they give you the traffic
They give you one
numbers, but they don't give, in the past, you could see
It was granular.
Right.
what is digital marketing, that might be a link back to me, I got 52 visits, now it's just, you got 52 visits.
Right, so you
Which is a
don't- you
big
don't
difference,
know-
because that totally flips the search
Right.
engine optimization paradigm. You
Right.
can't optimize for keywords, now you just
Right.
kinda gotta be good. You gotta have
Right.
good content that people want.
Because
and
you
want
don't
to-
know
yeah.
who's, one of the great things about online marketing is that you can measure what you're doing and you can see how well you're doing. You can see how many visits, you can see what content is doing well. If you're writing about certain topics and they're getting a lot more, that blog post or whatever is getting a lot more hits, you want to do more like that, and you can see. And, it's one of the improvements over traditional PR because I could never really tell a client. It was really hard, you get something in the New York Times, it doesn't necessarily go right to the bottom line, people are like dumbfounded, the phone doesn't ring and you get a big media hit like that, but you have to really keep
Oh, yeah, I've heard that
you really have to keep your eye on what's changing, because it's changing, things are changing every day, so don't get too used to something that's successful because it could be gone tomorrow.
So I know we've got we are getting close on time, so let's move on. So this young lady back here, and then you
I'm
can
coming
go
from a
ahead.
different place. I was talking to Ellie earlier. I'm working with a small nonprofit with no money, and they're trying to build a social media presence. And from what you're saying, doing a blog is a good place to start and understand about content. But as this gentleman said, it's a slow burn. What are some faster ways? How do you walk and chew gum? If you need to get a message out quickly, how do you do that? Even, because you start a blog now, it's already, in some ways, too late if you're trying to get the word out. because
Why is
people
it
don't
too
know who
late?
you are.
Why is it too late? If it's a new topic and you're owning it.
Well, yes, but
I was thinking about an
I guess one of
event.
the reasons is,
An event that's coming
we
up.
have also an event coming up, October 29th. And we're trying to get the word out about the event, but even at the same time, we haven't built a social media presence. So how do you do that? Do the slow burn, the slow build, and at the same time, get the word
Well,
out
you
there?
Well, I think-
one
I think
answer
there's-
is, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, one thing, I think when you have a shorter time frame, at least online, there are some techniques that are rolls of the dice, and it's that simple. I mean, to do something systematically takes time. I mean, there's no free lunch. But we had a gentleman at the last panel who specializes in viral videos. Now he goes for the all in. I mean, he created, for Oakley, he created a golf cart in partnership with a professional golfer that was a hovercraft golf cart, and it was awesome. And the thing flew, and he put it out on the web. And he got all kinds of traffic because it was just awesome. Now, there was no science behind it. There was no analyzing. There was no relationship. But the thing rolled. I mean, it was great. So he got attention. There was a guy for a company called Blendtec. His blades were so strong that he was putting golf balls and 2x4s in his blender blades. And he made videos of it. just really cool.
Well-
So, but it doesn't always work.
Let's
you know?
talk about this for a second. Okay, so is there a person that's being honored at the event? Is there one human being that's
No.
actually being?
No, it's going to be a restaurant event. This is in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And we're trying to get 50 restaurants to donate 15% of their proceeds for the night,
Between now and the 29th?
just one night.
Okay, well, no, but I mean, it's like day after tomorrow. No, I was just saying, how are you gonna, you know, I think you're starting a little late, but I do think that you need a spokesperson, you need somebody
Right.
in your organization that can talk, that can speak to the, did you say Brooklyn? Did you say?
Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. See, Brooklyn has so many local newspapers and hyper-local online, and
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Brooklyn is so hot right now. You know, getting to those people with your spokesperson and having them
Right.
talk about why you're doing this. It very simply, just the scintilla of that will. But you have to be very aggressive about it. You can't. It isn't a slow burn if you're doing something in a trendy part of the world, and it actually is. Well, it's about food, so everybody's going to listen.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, a specific.
And guys, just to slow you down,
Yeah, yeah.
just like short
Okay.
answers from you
Sure.
two,
Yeah.
and then we have
Short
a
answers.
question and question.
I would just say a specific
Yeah.
event 3 weeks from today is a lot different than what we've been talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm still not clear. Are you wanting to use social media to get people to show up, or are you trying to get social media to get restaurants involved?
To get people to show up.
Okay, the thing to do is, I mean, it's very easy to build an influencer list on Twitter. Facebook's a little bit different,
That's what I
but
told her too.
but definitely Twitter. You can go up and do lots of different searches on Twitter .search.com using the variations of Brooklyn restaurants, Brooklyn foodies, Brooklyn gourmet. If you start doing searches like that, you will quickly find the 10 or 15 people who are at the center of that universe. And now Twitter, just in the last few months, has started doing, if you follow someone on Twitter, it will automatically show you 3 related people
Right.
to that person. You can follow those people. You could easily, in 3 or 4 hours of time, build up easily 400 or 500 people who
Yeah.
do nothing but go on Twitter and talk about restaurants in Brooklyn. That's your core audience. Go after those people
When you
and talk to
tweet, when
them.
you tweet those people, make sure it's something finite.
Yeah.
It can't be. It has to be something that actually says what the event is in 140
Right,
characters. So
right.
you got to be careful.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
okay,
that's
short. Guys, I'm sorry, I gotta.
How do you find it?
Wait, I'm sorry, I gotta cut you short because we're running short on time and we do need to get
We'll
to.
talk to you.
We'll talk to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ellie, did you have a response to that or?
No, I
All
was
right,
just
so
saying.
I want to get a question from
No.
Anthony and then a
No.
question from Robert.
Yeah, what you're talking about, and I've got some background in it, it involves a lot of time, a lot of expertise, a lot of practice. It's an investment for a company.
Sure.
How do you project ROI for social? How do you monetize it at the end?
All right, may I answer that?
Sure.
There are
Absolutely. Jump in.
tools. You know, I mentioned that I'm a partner for HubSpot, that
Yeah.
software. Well, that software has what's called closed loop analytics. So that you can, when somebody fills out a form on your website and becomes a contact, and you nurture that person and ultimately they become a buyer, you can close the loop on that. So you can see how much, where your people are coming from, what social networks are giving you the most activity, who's converting, how many people are converting from each, you can just see what's going on. It's totally transparent. The analytics are amazing. And there are other tools. I use HubSpot because it does close the loop. So I can see at the end of a month.
Let's review here. You've already got the person. How do you project ahead of time when you know it's gonna take you 6 months to get the results?
It's not going to take 6 months.
It doesn't.
Months, whatever.
How do you
A lot of
project
things are
it?
very instantaneous if you do it right. You don't have to be. You're wrong about one thing. You don't have to be an expert. What you have to be is you have to have that. You have to have that mission. You have to know exactly what you want to say, and then you have to find the people to say it to. And that if you're really sure of yourself and you're not just trying to tell everybody everything in your head. You're just the one thing. It's always been the same thing. I've been in this business since '86, and it's always the same thing. That one thing. If you can find that one thing and you give it to as many people as you can, locally, nationally, it doesn't matter. It will work. It just has to be one thing, and you have to stick with it. You can't just start, and another thing, and another thing. You can't be like
Yeah,
that.
you
So
do
I
have to keep
disagree,
your eye on the
I
ball.
disagree about the expertise.
And
I've seen people do it with no
I
expertise.
I have a quick question on that.
Expertise
Obviously,
gets in the way?
obviously there are lots of tools in analytics, and HubSpot being one of them. I would also argue that with all of the brain power at Google, all the brain power at
Yeah.
Microsoft, all the brain power at Yahoo, that they still can't measure everything. But what I can tell you is, your customers are online. They're doing searches, they're participating in social media. So I may not be able to connect the dots.
24 hours a day.
I may not be able to connect the dots 100%, but I would say that if you don't do this, that you're kind of leaving that on the table. And I'm not talking about going out and tweeting about twerking or Miley Cyrus, but specifically targeting potential customers and being able to find them on social media. And there are tools that you can do that for free and target specifically your message so that you can see an absolute bottom line result of making relationships for people who will sign on the dotted line of whatever
I think
product
what
or
you
service.
said
You
is
put
the
that
most
well.
important thing.
Thank you.
And the reality is, I mean, sometimes, we may not want to think that people are using it. You may say, oh, my customers aren't using Twitter, or my customers aren't using Facebook. I mean, I have 2 small kids. It's fascinating to me from a media perspective. They don't watch TV. They'll sit with an iPad and look at video after video on YouTube for an hour to an hour and a half. That's a completely different way of consuming media, and that's what they're growing up with. And they're, that's just one example. The fact is, your customers and potential customers are online. It's a matter of finding
It's
them.
true. And
And
you know what?
sometimes it isn't about ROI. Sometimes a lot of this is about brand architecture, and you really do have to consider that. And like Jeff said, you can't not do this. I mean, it's basically taking your audience and discounting them, because that's all people do all day long. Is they find things and they send it to their friends. It's what they do at work. It's what they do when they're in bed. That's what they do. It doesn't matter where they are. Airplanes. That's all people do now, and it's all ages. It's not, it's little kids, it's old people, it's little, whatever. It's everybody, and it's just a fact of life. So, yes, there's ROI, but there's also brand architecture, and that's a building. That's something where you start to see, where more people start to recognize what you're doing, and that is incredibly important. And that's really done these days through all of these mechanisms that we just talked
Yeah,
about.
and I just want to say one thing that, first of all, it doesn't matter who your audience is, they're all online. My mother is 86 and she buys shoes on Zappos, and she reads the New York Times on her computer now. She got rid of her print. I was floored by that, but she loves it. One thing I will say, it's a lot of work, but guess what? Your marketing was always a critical thing. People tend to push it to the side and ignore it, but it's how you build your business. It's how you generate your sales. One thing that's important to recognize, does anybody have planned to be delivering their product through a sales channel, an outside sales or inside sales channel? If it's in your business plan, you have to recognize the huge shift that has taken place between sales and marketing. You have to get up to speed so that you can make those 2 pieces of your business integrate and work efficiently and productively together. That's one thing. The other thing that's really most important is if you do adopt this and you do marketing the way you have to do it today, you have a huge opportunity to leapfrog your competition. Because guess what? Everybody's sitting around whining about it takes too much time, it's an investment, what am I going to get out of it? But guess what? The people who are doing it, if your competitors aren't, and you are, you're going to be on Google page 1. They're not. So, and guess what? Most of them aren't.
They're not doing it.
So, guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have time for a question from Robert and one more question, and then we're good.
The question is a statement. I mean, I don't discount the importance of digital or social, but I think the press release over the wire still gets a lot of reach and attention.
For material items,
May sound old school, but-
where something involves money, absolutely. When it doesn't involve money, people ignore it like it was.
What do you mean money?
It has to be material. There has to be a figure. Somebody has to have raised money, sold money, given money away. It has to have money in it. I'm telling you, I do this every day, and I've done it for 25 years, and press releases are, yes, that press release will be on Yahoo. as a press release, but no one's reading it.
Well, if it's an interesting press release and it's written well, and if it's newsworthy.
It has to be, yes, if it's written well, but it can't, I think people misunderstand the whole idea of a press release. If you take what's written well in that little format and you start giving it to people, as opposed to just sending it out en masse, you get a lot more attention. Again, we talked about that 15 or 20 people. I've been putting out press releases for non-material things for years. It's a giant waste of time and money and energy. It doesn't work, and unless you're, reinventing the wheel. And there has to be money in it. I'm telling you, this is scientific. Even the people at Business Wire will, if you scratch them, they'll tell you, don't do things that don't involve money. Don't just do launches, because there's no such thing as a free launch.
That was good.
Thank you.
Took me a minute.
I've
It's
been saying that
getting
for
late.
years. All right.
Are there any other questions? We probably have time for about one more. Well, thank you, everybody.
I
for
have one last
Oh,
tip.
yeah.
I think it was mentioned earlier, but I just wanted to mention it, that even if you don't use Google+, which is Google's social media platform, if you do any of this that we're talking about and you create content, whether it's a blog or a podcast or a video, at least create a Google+ account and share that content via Google+, because guys who look at search engine optimization statistics have done the studies, and any content shared through Google+ goes into the main Google index a lot quicker, meaning people
Yep.
can find it. So just one tip, even if you
Link.
don't.
Put links
Yeah,
on it.
exactly.
Yep.
So, just FYI.
So thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you
I
very
really
much.
enjoyed the spirited questions.
Yes, I did. I like it too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.